Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Dr. James Morehen on, and he's a performance nutritionist. Hi, James.
Hiya, how are we?
Good, thank you. And yourself?
Yeah, all good, thank you. All good, all good.
Amazing. Let's jump straight in then, James. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I guess at the moment, I'm a performance nutritionist, practicing and working within the world of elite sport, in particular international football. So I work at the FA. That's my current employment, and the direct team that I work with is the women's senior team, of whom we've got many over in Japan, ready for the Team GB Olympics. So that's where I'm currently at, and I've kind of had previous roles and responsibilities within West Ham Football Club, also kind of amateur combat sport athletes. And my PhD was fully funded by two professional rugby league organisations, so kind of three experience with professional rugby players.
Very cool. So what made you go into, performance nutrition?
Yeah, I think like with many sport and exercise science undergrad students, it was a drive for that want and desire of not actually being a professional athlete myself, and so it was, I guess, the drive to support them as a support personnel, and within the sports science discipline, there's obviously a number of different disciplines, whether that be sports psychology, sport nutrition, sports science itself, strength and conditioning. But for me, it was really the interest of how, depending on what you eat, kind of meal to meal, day to day, week to week, month to month, can really have a quite a big influence on the ability of an athlete to train and recover correctly, which would result in positive or negative training adaptation, but also then how that can directly impact elite level winning performances. And also if you don't do it correctly, how it could be quite detrimental to elite level performance as well. So yeah, that was really where the interest of nutrition came from, I guess.
And so you obviously studied that your undergrad, and that's probably where you got your initial flair for that nutrition side of things. What did you do? Obviously, your PhD in that, but how did you start to specifically get more into that topic?
Yeah, it was I guess, an exposure of what nutrition looks like from a research point of view in and around the laboratories at Liverpool John Moores University. So an unbelievable academic institute to study at, with lots and lots of great teachers and PhD students at the time that were actively working in sport. And so I used to always put my hand up and volunteer and want to get involved in research projects as much as I could, and applied projects, whether that be in the labs or kind of out in the field. And it was really that taste of what research in performance nutrition looked like when I was studying my undergrad and masters that then gave me the drive to go on and study that at a PhD level. So I guess the initial ignition of the flame, I guess, would be putting my hand up, volunteering, looking at what it looked like from a laboratory research point of view as a student, that then kind of gave me the motivation and the drive to want to study it myself as a PhD student.
I think nutrition in sport has obviously come a long, long way from, 10, 20 years previous. But do you think professional sport, it's still something that's growing in levels of importance? I think I listened to James Haskell's podcast a few months ago, and he was talking about when he went and played with a French team, and their levels of nutrition compared to what he was used to in England were completely different. I think he said the nutritionist on the coach said, right, jump off here at the gas station, get yourself a sandwich and get back on. So there's different levels. And do you think it's still growing in importance across different sports?
Yeah, I listened to that exact same podcast as well, actually, and it got me thinking about how nutrition is received and accepted, I guess, within the elite circles. But yeah, look, it is massively still growing. the influence of sports science within professional sport is actually relatively new. And I remember when Sir Alex Ferguson retired, he actually got asked, what was the biggest change that he saw in professional football, and he said it was the influence of sports science that's come into the discipline. So, and I've got, Sir Alex Ferguson retired however many years ago, so it is still relatively new, and I think every single year it is growing as an industry. There's been, more and more jobs are becoming available for part-time consultants or full-time practitioners, and yeah, it is just growing. The more research that happens, the more funding that's involved, the more we're beginning to find out how nutrition can influence adaptation and performance, and it's a really exciting area. Having said that, I would say that nutrition is actually probably the newest person to the sports science party, and with that, unfortunately, we still see many clubs and organisations, I would say, trying to shortcut the provision of nutrition within their professional environment. There's many examples of where you've got clubs and organisations having fitness coaches and strength and conditioning coaches who are qualified and professional in their own discipline, actually trying to deliver and operate a service of nutrition, which actually is its own qualified discipline. So although it is growing and it is developing, there's still a lot of room for that growing to happen. And I think the golden outcome of it all is to have a full-time nutritionist in every sporting organisation within the UK, just like there is a strength and conditioning coach or a sports scientist or a fitness coach.
How accepted are the athletes to having a nutritionist, and how sort of like controlled is their intake of food and what they're actually getting in? Is it over the years, obviously the idea of nutrition has increased and is more widely accepted, but is it actually being adopted by the athletes?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's something that we battle with kind of day in, day out with many stakeholders that all have an opinion on nutrition and ultimately an influence on nutrition. So I think the first thing to highlight here is that every single human being on the planet eats, and with that, every single person will have their own view and their own opinion of what nutrition looks like in their eyes. And it's down to us as registered and qualified nutritionists to educate or re-educate some of those individuals, whether they're support staff or whether they're actually the athletes, to say, right, although this is your view on what good nutrition looks like, and this is your view on what the athlete should or shouldn't consume, this is actually what the scientific literature says, and we have to spend time coaching and educating those individuals. So that's the first thing to highlight. And then going back to your second question, is it accepted by the athletes at the moment? Like with anything, there are some athletes that absolutely love it, and they really want to buy into the education, the coaching, and the strategies that you're trying to give them. But like with anything, there's also athletes that don't really get off on nutrition. They don't really enjoy it as much as maybe I do, and their kind of passionate drive to buy into it might not be there. But they're the difficult eggs that should be quite fun and challenging to work with. And it's down to us as the passionate nutritionists to get them to buy into the ideas and the education that we're trying to provide. So my learnings as a practitioner to date, and I'm only someone in the industry that's had a very short career, but where I have found my biggest wins with athletes that either enjoy it already or the athletes that don't enjoy it already, is to really sit down with them and spend some good time educating them and coaching them on a one-to-one level, and really getting to know them as a person first. Understanding what makes them motivated to want to get better in their sport, what drives them to get better each day, what is the hook that we can grab onto to get them to buy into the strategies that I'm trying to deliver with them. And I think once you get to know the person and you build that level of trust, it becomes a lot easier. And I, for one, have learned that from lessons in the past and mistakes that I've made, where you might be meeting an athlete for the first time, and straight away you're trying to shove a nutrition plan in front of their face, and you actually haven't asked them how their weekend was. And I think that's where it's really key as a practitioner to, dial up and dial down certain parts of your delivery at the right time of the day, and there's a right place and the right time to do that.
And you kind of touched on it earlier when you mentioned about stakeholders. So we had Robert Pacey back on the podcast a while ago, and he was talking about, strength and conditioning coaches are kind of in their own little battle with the whole coaching team to get time with the athletes, to get their points across and have their impact on that athlete to then have an impact on the team. So how do you manage it within the nutrition department to be able to get enough time with the athletes to have that impact?
Yeah, historically, whether it's rugby, football, and even boxing, like historically, it can be difficult because everyone wants their piece of the pie with the athlete. And I think some individuals and some support staff just see nutrition as being breakfast, lunch, dinner in and around the dining hall, whereas it's so much bigger than that. There is so much to talk about and educate the athlete on performance nutrition. And the way I've tried to sell it previously to other key stakeholders is to say, look, you can have that athlete as fit as he can possibly be, injury-free, health and wellness is absolutely amazing. He's had the best night's sleep, or she's had the best night's sleep. But unfortunately, if they don't fuel correctly for the 80 or 90-minute game, then it doesn't matter how good they are, they're going to run out of energy towards the back end of the game. And, how good has it been to see during the Euros recently that you've got players that are taking on fuel halfway through the second half. You've got, guys running onto the side of the pitch with carbohydrate-based solutions to make sure players are fueling during the match. And that's not breakfast, lunch and dinner anymore. That is elite level fueling. So it's really selling that message to the coaches and having the buy-in with the coaches, because in my experience, when I've had the time with the players and I've sat down with the players, they get it, they understand it, and they really want to buy into it. But it is kind of getting that green light from those people that, decide when the meetings happen. And again, it's, I would say, education with those individuals, reframing performance nutrition, not to just be, have we got a breakfast, lunch and dinner menu that looks amazing? Because if we have, arguably that's just a food and beverage manager. That's not necessarily a performance nutritionist.
No, certainly. How have you developed? How do you sort of go from one athlete to another? You obviously work with football as well as you've worked with rugby and you said martial arts and things like that. They're different. Those body types, the endurance, the strength, they're very different. How is it tailoring stuff or tailoring nutrition plans to these different environments?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing with performance nutrition is that the literature is there. So if I want to know what the energy expenditure of a freestyle swimmer is, or, a BMX cyclist or whatever, a lot of the time you can go out and you can find that literature and you can read it and you can spend time dissecting that information. It then comes down to how you then apply it for that individual. Now, the beauty of football and rugby is that there's a lot of research out there. Only recently, last year, we had the UEFA consensus statement on performance nutrition for professional football player. So you've got the world leading experts in the area all coming together to basically say, this is, from an evidence-based point of view, what professional football players should be doing in regards to carbs, proteins, vitamins, minerals, etc. Now it's down to me as a practitioner to take that information and to break it down into really understandable, engaging, bite-sized focus blocks of knowledge bombs, if you like, where players can understand it and they can get it at their level, because they're not going to go away and read that journal. They're not going to go away and read the consensus statement, but it's down to me to know that. So in terms of like, how do you differ it for each sport? Then it's looking at the literature that's available within each sport. What can we learn from that literature? from a nutrition point of view, but also from a training demand point of view, from an energy expenditure point of view. You know, what does a 30-minute boxing match or boxing fight look like from an energy expenditure? What does a 5K run in the morning look like from an energy expenditure point of view? And then how can we formulate that into nutrition strategies to support the training and competition demands of that sport? But the kind of 2-sentence summary of that, I guess, is that to go out and read and to go out and have a look at the literature, because the majority of the time it is out there. And if it isn't out there, maybe that's the time where we have to put our hands up and do the study ourselves.
And what is an average day for you like? You know, what are some of the tasks that you're actually doing as a performance nutritionist?
Yeah, I mean, a great question to ask at the moment, because obviously the worldwide pandemic has shifted a lot of things for many people. But for me, without COVID here, my normal week or day would be that I have 3 days on site at St George's Park. And then within that day, when we're not servicing players on camp and you know, delivering our kind of education and working with players one-to-one on camp, it will be working with hotels to structure and formulate menus with our performance chefs. It might be working on outside projects, including things like, you know, the FA supplement governance and policy document, or it could be conducting our own in-house research. So we've done the first energy expenditure study worldwide ever in international female football players. So it's spending time writing that paper up as an example. So there's loads of different things really that can happen. And I think the uniqueness about the international setup is that we only see our athletes when there's an international camp, and that might only be 60 days of the year. So for the rest of the year, you're actually working on projects that allow your delivery of content when you're with the athletes to be even better. So it might be building lesson plans, it might be building presentations, it could be making the environment where they consume their breakfast and lunch and dinner more educational with different digital assets on the wall, or the way that you lay out the room might be different. So lots of different things really to focus on when you're not on camp.
And what do you think are some of the key personality traits that a nutritionist needs to help these athletes at such a high level?
Yeah, great question. And it's a great question because it's a question I've asked 10 practitioners in the book that I'm currently writing as well. Due to be published soon. So there's a little plug for that. But
so what's the book on?
Yeah, look, basically I've gone out and I've asked 10 what I would call very well respected and successful nutritionists in their own right, across sports, whether that's Premier League, elite level endurance cycling, pro rugby, and I've asked them a handful of questions that I think would help younger practitioners either get their first job in the industry, or even if they've got their first job, it would be to help them to develop a little bit quicker in that role. And this was one of the questions, you know, what do I think, or what do the people that I interviewed think are the key personality traits that we need to work in our industry? And I quite often ask myself the same question. And for me, I think communication is an unbelievable skill that we have to possess, because we are a nutrition coach. We are trying to take the education that we have learned at university. We're trying to take the knowledge that we read in journal publications, and we're trying to impart that knowledge onto the athlete so that they understand it at their level. And with that, you are effectively coaching. There's an element of pedagogy in that. So being an excellent communicator is a key trait. Having an ounce of confidence is going to be key as well, because, you know, if you're in a room and you've got to present to 30 players on protein metabolism, you have to have an element of confidence in that, because otherwise they're going to see straight through it and they're going to wonder, if you're not confident, are you talking the correct stuff, or are you trying to waffle your way through this? So confidence is key. And then I think another big thing that I've done throughout my career, and I would advise everyone to do is to put your hand up and to volunteer. I think there is an air of people not wanting to do things for free anymore. And I personally think that we have to get over that, and we have to understand that if there's a head coach of a Premier League football team and they want you to work with their athletes, they need to know that you've had experience before and that you've had that craft knowledge of being hands-on with athletes. And when you're in your early career, the only way to really get that is to put your hand up and volunteer and to say, yeah, I'll help out, no problem. So that would be my final one there. And then just a bonus one, if I can, is to read. It's to read the journals, it's to read the literature, and to keep yourself up to date with all of the current science.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the with all the points, but mostly with the last one about reading your subject and constantly learning. I think having interviewed over 100 different professionals, that's come up time and time again. The need to constantly be learning and pushing your own knowledge forward, because it only helps you really in the long run. And I love the idea for the book. That is, anything that helps people with careers, we love. And I think that sounds like a really interesting book. So be sure to let us know when that comes out.
Yeah, and look, just for the background of that, I am a very early career practitioner, and I'm lucky in the way that my path has navigated itself. I've worked hard for it, but I've got a good core group of people around me, and I've had over the last couple of years loads and loads of young students and practitioners message me and ask me questions about my job, how I got into the industry, what bits of advice I would impart over to them. And I just thought, oh my God, there is literally a book in this, because these questions that you're asking me, it was 7 years ago that I was asking other people about it, how I could get the job in the industry. And I think the one thing that university degrees do very, very well is they teach you the fundamental knowledge and the underpinning principles of sports science and sport nutrition. But I think there's a missing gap as to when you've got that education and you now have qualified, how do you make the step from being a qualified registered nutritionist into that first role? And what are the key traits that you might need as an individual? Because if I knew back in 2015 that a key trait that I needed was going to be confidence in presenting, then I might have enrolled on an element of CBD that taught me how to be more confident when I'm presenting. And that arguably would have put me in a better place when I then went for my first interviews, because I would be confident in the way that I'm presenting and standing up in front of people.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. This might be a bit of a tough ask, but if you could name one positive, so the biggest positive you have, or you get out of doing this career, what would it be?
Oh, I think it is genuinely being able to influence elite level winning performances. And seeing that change in people. I mean, some of the most rewarding projects I've worked on has been with some of the boxers I've worked with. Seeing a boxer eat more food than he's ever eaten, but lose weight at the same time, and being able to put him in a ring in a very well nourished state, non-dehydrated, and then allow him to go on and win a version of the world title was a great experience to see. And that there is where directly nutrition has supported a world-winning performance. So I think that from an elite level athlete point of view, and then on a kind of corporate private client point of view, I would say it's seeing people drop unwanted fat mass and actually becoming a healthier individual for their kids and for their family.
Yeah, definitely. And on the back of that, what would be maybe the two biggest opportunities you felt you had? It may be the boxing one was one, but the two biggest, opportunities you've had so far from your career.
I would say to represent my country, if I can say that. So, I work for England football. I work for the FA. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
I've been at games where the national anthem is being sung, and you are there thinking, I'm a part of this journey. So that's been good, and combined with that was being able to work with some of the Team GB athletes that we've got in Japan now, who fingers crossed will go on and win a gold medal. And I've directly been involved in educating them around how do they fuel and recover for 6 or 7 games in 17 days, because that's quite a relentless kind of fixture window. So I'd say, yeah, those opportunities. And then the one from the rugby would be walking out at Wembley with the team that I was working with in a final. And
very cool.
Yeah, being able to walk out of the national stadium, but being on the pitch and that side of the barrier, I guess.
What would be some less favourable aspects of this job role and this industry?
Less favourable. I mean, look, if there are individuals that are working as private consultants and you're self-employed, then one of those, whether it's a negative or not, but it's probably more of an awareness piece, is that you've got to continuously make sure that you have your work and that you're finding those contracts and you're finding the projects to be working on, because if they all dry up, then obviously there's no financial income coming into the bank. So that would be one on a private point of view. And then sometimes my frustrations, I wouldn't say it's probably less favourable, but frustrations at time is that I just don't think performance nutrition at present, not in all sports and not in all clubs, but as a whole, I don't think it's got the respect that it deserves as a discipline at the moment. And it draws me back to one of my first points. I still think there's individuals, clubs and organisations that just try and tick a box with it, and they genuinely don't realise how influential fueling and recovering correctly can be for that individual, but also for their squad. And I've proven it firsthand, like in rugby, in boxing and in football, that if you can get the majority of the squad moving in the right direction with nutrition, it can have a massive, massive influence.
And what would be something that you have to deal with on a daily basis, but it's probably not in the job description?
Probably, I don't know actually. Like, one thing that comes to my mind is being creative with like menu ideas. But more and more people are putting that in that description now, and unfortunately we work with performance chefs. I think an element of accountability for the individual. So a lot of the athletes I've worked with, sometimes they just need you to hold their hand through the process, and they just need you to reconfirm and reinforce the points that you've made and the education. So there's almost like that, not father figure, but that brother figure, uncle figure, whatever way we want to frame it. But you are there just walking them through, holding the hand. No, we are doing the right thing. Keep going. Trust the process. So there's that. And then a big area that I don't think would be in job descriptions, but it's crucial for practitioners to make sure they do is reflective practice. And it's to constantly look at, what did I do well that day? What could I have learned from? What overall that week? Was it a good week? Was it a bad week? What lessons were there for me to progress forward? And I think really that's just following a growth mindset in everything you do. And if you do that, nothing will ever be a negative or a failure. It'll always just be a lesson because you're learning from it.
And would you still go into this industry knowing everything you know now?
Yeah, 100%.
That's awesome to hear.
It sounds like you've got a real passion for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think again, it's one of the chapters I was just writing on the book today. But there's an area there where one of the practitioners talks about having passion within the industry that you do. And I know Eddie Hearn, and he's got his own podcast called No Passion, No Point. And I think that sums it up brilliantly. That unless you're passionate in what you're doing, but what is the point in doing it? Because we're only here once, and we're not here for a long time. We're here for a good time, and you've got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy the time that you are here.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Listen, James, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been really interesting to talk to you and learning all about what you do.
No problems, anytime. And yeah, I hope the listeners get something from it.
Thank you. Where can people find you, reach out and see what you're doing?
Yeah, so I've got my own Instagram kind of page at Morehen Performance. I've got a website, morehenperformance.com, and then I'm quite active on Twitter and LinkedIn under the handles of just James Morehen, which is my name. And yeah, so if people have got questions or they want to ask me a few more ideas or anything that I've spoke about today, please do reach out. I'm always happy to speak with people.
Amazing. Thanks again, James. Cheers.
No problem. Thank you.